The reluctant hero, Commander Jack Hawkins, stood at the viewport of his small scout ship, gazing out at the bustling spaceport before him. The once decorated war hero now looked every bit the grizzled, world-weary spacer he had become in the years since Earth's last great conflict. His weathered face bore the scars of countless battles, and his steel-grey hair had long since outpaced the pepper. With a weary sigh, Jack turned away from the view and made his way to the ship's exit ramp. He had come to this backwater world seeking some measure of peace and quiet in his retirement. Instead, he found himself walking straight into the kind of situation he'd spent years trying to forget. The spaceport was a hive of activity, beings of all shapes and sizes bustling about their business. But Jack's keen eyes quickly picked out the details others might miss: the furtive glances, the hushed conversations, the subtle exchange of credits that spoke of a thriving black market. As he wove his way through the crowd, a commotion near one of the docking bays caught his attention. A group of rough-looking aliens had gathered around what appeared to be some kind of auction block. Jack's stomach turned as he realized what was happening: a slave auction. He tried to look away, to keep walking, but found his feet carrying him closer to the scene. On the makeshift stage, a motley assortment of alien beings were being paraded before the jeering crowd. Jack's fists clenched at his sides as he took in their frightened, desperate expressions. At the edge of the stage stood 4 female aliens who immediately caught Jack's eye. They were clearly from different species, but all shared a look of quiet defiance in the face of their dire situation. The tallest was a statuesque warrior with burnished copper skin and eyes that flashed with barely contained fury. Beside her stood a willowy figure with iridescent, shimmering skin and large, liquid eyes that darted nervously about. Next was a smaller, feline-like alien with sharp teeth bared in a silent snarl. The last was a plant-like being with pale green skin and faceted eyes that observed the proceedings with eerie calm. As the bidding began, Jack found himself overcome by memories of all the injustices he had witnessed and fought against over the years. Before he fully realized what he was doing, his hand shot up, and his gruff voice called out a bid. The auctioneer's many eyes blinked in surprise before a greedy grin spread across his face. 5,000 credits from the human. Do I hear 6,000? Jack's heart raced as the bidding continued to climb. He hadn't planned on this, hadn't come prepared to make such a purchase. But he couldn't back down now, not with those 4 pairs of eyes locked onto him with a mixture of hope and suspicion. Just as Jack was beginning to worry he'd be outbid, a smooth voice from the back of the crowd caught everyone's attention: 15,000 credits. The crowd parted to reveal a tall, regal figure dressed in ornate robes. Jack immediately recognized him as Prince Zoltar, the system's notorious warlord and slaver. Zoltar's cold eyes locked onto Jack's, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Jack's jaw clenched. He couldn't let Zoltar win. 20,000, he growled, digging deep into his savings. A tense silence fell over the crowd as Zoltar considered his options. For a long moment, it seemed he might raise the stakes further. But then, to everyone's surprise, he simply stepped back with a nod. Sold, the auctioneer barked, practically salivating. To the human for 20,000 credits. As Jack approached the stage, the weight of what he'd done began to settle on his shoulders. The 4 alien women watched him warily as their shackles were removed. He swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. "You're free," he said quietly, his voice rough with emotion. "I offer you sanctuary, if you wish it." For a long moment, none of them moved. Then slowly, the copper-skinned warrior stepped forward. Her eyes bored into his, searching for any sign of deception. "Why?" she demanded, her voice strong despite everything she'd been through. "Why would you do this?" Jack let his gaze sweep over all 4 of them: the warrior, the empath, the predator, and the plant being. Each one had suffered. Each one was looking for something to believe in. He thought of all the ghosts that haunted him, of the lonely homestead waiting for him, and of the injustices that still plagued the galaxy he'd fought so hard to protect. Because it's the right thing to do, he answered simply. The tension lingered as they followed Jack to his small ship. The warrior, who introduced herself as Kira, stayed close, her warrior instincts on high alert. Lyra, the empathic alien with shimmering skin, moved tentatively, her large eyes welling with unshed tears. Farah, the feline-like predator, trailed behind, casting suspicious glances at Jack. Luna, the plant being, glided quietly, her appendages shifting to adapt to the ship's layout. As they settled in for the journey to Jack's home, a quiet human colony world, far from the lawless chaos of the galactic fringe, he could feel the weight of their unspoken questions. He knew words alone wouldn't ease their fears. "I know you have no reason to trust me," Jack said, turning to face them. His voice, though gruff, held a gentleness that came from years of hard-won wisdom. "But I give you my word as a soldier and as a man, you're under my protection now. No harm will come to you." The women exchanged glances, and Jack sensed that Lyra was likely involved in their unspoken communication, linking their emotions. Finally, Kira stepped forward. "We accept your offer of sanctuary, Jack Hawkins," she said, her voice formal but wary. "But know this, we are not helpless. If you deceive us, we will defend ourselves." Jack nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "I wouldn't expect anything less." As the ship hurtled through hyperspace, Jack retreated to the cockpit, leaving the women to settle in. He stared out at the swirling lights, a heavy feeling in his chest. He had done the right thing, but a part of him knew this was only the beginning. He had stepped into something far larger than himself. The journey back to his homestead had begun, but so had something much more profound. As Jack plotted their course, he couldn't shake the feeling that his life, and theirs, was about to change in ways he never imagined. This wasn't just a rescue. This was the beginning of something extraordinary. Alien bonds forged. As Jack's battered scout ship descended through the atmosphere of Novaterra, the lush landscape of his homestead stretched out before them. The stark contrast between this tranquil haven and the chaotic spaceport they'd left behind wasn't lost on the four alien women as they cautiously disembarked. Towering trees with iridescent leaves swayed gently in the breeze, their rustling a soothing melody after the harsh realities of their recent past. A crystal-clear stream meandered through the property, its waters glinting like liquid starlight in the planet's twin suns. Jack led them toward his home, a weather-worn but sturdy structure nestled amid the verdant beauty. It was a curious blend of advanced technology and rustic charm, a reflection of its owner's complex history. "It's not much," Jack said, his gruff voice tinged with a hint of embarrassment, "but it's home. You're welcome to stay as long as you need." The women spread out cautiously, each exploring the unfamiliar space in their own way. Kira remained vigilant, her copper skin gleaming as she scanned for potential threats. Lyra moved with ethereal grace, her iridescent form shimmering as she picked up on the emotional residue of Jack's years of solitude. Farah prowled the perimeter, her feline instincts on high alert, while Luna was drawn to the outdated technology scattered around the home, her faceted eyes gleaming with interest. As Jack busied himself preparing a meal, the air grew thick with unspoken tension. Kira was the first to break the silence. "Jack Hawkins," she said, her voice formal, "I must speak with you about the debt of honor I now owe." Jack turned from the stove, confusion crossing his weathered features. "Debt? There's no debt here. I told you you're free." Kira shook her head, stepping closer. "In my culture, a life saved is a life owed. By rescuing me, you have bound me to your service until the debt is repaid." Jack frowned, the cultural misunderstanding creating a palpable tension. "That's not how it works here, Kira. You don't owe me anything." As their voices rose, neither fully grasping the other's perspective, Lyra winced. The empath, overwhelmed by the conflicting emotions, instinctively reached out with her abilities. A wave of calm washed over the room, causing both Jack and Kira to pause. I'm sorry," Lyra whispered, embarrassed by her intervention. There's so much fear, so much uncertainty. Can't we try to understand each other? Jack's expression softened, and he nodded. You're right, Lyra. We've all got a lot to learn. As the evening wore on, they gathered around the table to eat. The unfamiliar food served as a point of curiosity, sparking conversation and slowly easing the tension. Farah, ever the skeptic, poked at her meal suspiciously. How do we know this isn't some human trick? She growled, her tail twitching. For all we know, you could be fattening us up for something nefarious. Jack chuckled, the sound rough but genuine, as though he hadn't used it in a long time. If I had any nefarious plans, there are easier ways than cooking up a mediocre dinner. Farah narrowed her eyes but couldn't quite suppress a flicker of amusement. Fair point, old man. But I'm watching you. As they ate, Luna's gaze kept drifting toward the outdated systems around the house. Her curiosity eventually got the better of her. Your technology, she observed, it's quite primitive. If you'd allow me, I can make improvements to your home's efficiency. Jack blinked, caught off guard by the offer. That's kind of you, Luna, but you don't have to do anything to stay here. Luna tilted her head, her plant-like appendages swaying gently. It's not about earning my keep. It's about contributing. That's what a home is, isn't it? Everyone has a role. Her words struck a chord with Jack. It had been so long since his home had felt alive, since there had been anyone to share it with. He swallowed the lump in his throat and nodded. Yeah, I suppose it is. As night fell, the question of sleeping arrangements arose. Jack insisted the women take the bedrooms while he made do with the couch. But as he lay on the lumpy cushions, staring at the ceiling, sleep eluded him. The house, once silent, was now filled with the sounds of life. He could hear Farah pacing restlessly, her natural instincts still on edge. Lyra's soft murmurs carried through the walls, likely her way of processing the day's emotional overload. Luna quietly tinkered with some equipment, her curiosity undeterred even at night. And Kira, ever the protector, stood by the window, scanning the horizon. Jack's thoughts drifted to Sarah, his late wife. What would she have thought of all this? He could almost hear her laughter, see her smile at the strange family he had gathered. For the first time in years, the ache of her absence was softened by something new, something like hope. A soft sound broke through his thoughts, and he opened his eyes to find Kira standing over him, her presence both guarded and oddly comforting. You should rest, Jack Hawkins, she said quietly, her voice softer than before. I will keep watch. Kira, you don't have to. Pleased, he interrupted, a hint of vulnerability in her tone. Let me do this. It's comforting to have a purpose. Jack nodded, understanding the need to feel useful all too well. All right then. As he drifted off to sleep, a warmth spread through him, not just from Kira's protective presence, but from the realization that his lonely homestead was slowly becoming a home again. The next few days passed in a blur of adjustments and revelations. Each of the women began to find their place in this new, unexpected arrangement. Luna threw herself into upgrading the homestead's systems, her plant-like appendages proving surprisingly adept at manipulating technology. I've optimized your power grid, she announced one morning, a hint of pride in her voice. Efficiency is up by 37.2%. Farah, despite her initial suspicion, found herself drawn to the vast wilderness surrounding the homestead. Her feline instincts thrived in the lush forests, and she often returned from her explorations with valuable information about the local flora and fauna. Lyra's empathic abilities proved both a blessing and a challenge. While she could sense the growing bonds between them all, she also struggled with the intensity of emotions in such close quarters. Jack often found her meditating by the stream, seeking balance. Kira, true to her warrior nature, took it upon herself to establish a security perimeter around the property. But as the days passed, Jack noticed her rigid posture beginning to soften, her vigilance tempered by a growing sense of safety. As for Jack himself, he found his long-dormant leadership skills awakening. Coordinating the diverse needs and abilities of his new housemates gave him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. But with familiarity came new challenges. Jack stood at the sink one morning, washing dishes in his usual methodical way. He'd always found the mundane task oddly calming, but today, calm was the last thing on his mind. Kira, the ever-fearless warrior, had stationed herself right next to him, way too close. Her concept of personal space seemed more a suggestion than a rule, and Jack could feel the warmth of her body as she stood inches away, watching him with sharp eyes. "Need a hand?" she asked, her voice low but firm. "Ah, no, I've got it," Jack mumbled, trying to focus on scrubbing a stubborn plate. He could feel heat rising in his cheeks as Kira leaned in, her muscular arm brushing against his. "Well, I don't know how you humans do it, but you're scrubbing that pan like it owes you money," Kira remarked, her breath brushing against his neck. Jack nearly dropped the plate. He cleared his throat, his hands trembling slightly. "I'm just thorough." The proximity was stirring up feelings he hadn't felt in years, feelings he thought he'd buried with Sarah. It was disorienting, to say the least. As if sensing his inner turmoil, Lyra appeared, her empathic powers already tuned into the emotional tension. Without thinking, she placed a delicate hand on Jack's arm, her fingers cool against his skin. "You're anxious," Lyra said softly, her voice like a gentle breeze. "Let me help." The moment her touch connected with his arm, Jack felt a sudden surge of warmth, but not the calming kind. It was confusing. What was supposed to be a comforting gesture somehow sent a wave of jittery excitement coursing through him. Jack blinked, his brain short-circuiting. "I'm fine," he stammered, pulling his arm back gently, though the sensation lingered longer than it should have. Kira raised an eyebrow, glancing between Jack and Lyra with a smirk. "Looks like you're doing fine, all right." Before he could respond, Farah padded into the room, her feline grace practically oozing confidence. Until she hesitated, she had always been the strong, independent one, but today she seemed unsure. Her tail flicked nervously as she approached Jack. "Jack," she started, her voice softer than usual, "I could use some advice. About freedom." Jack turned, grateful for the distraction, but as Farah leaned in, her hand brushed against his shoulder, and her face came much closer than he expected. Her sharp features and piercing eyes stared into his, and he suddenly felt the air grow heavy with unspoken tension. It wasn't intentional, at least he didn't think it was, but her closeness only added to the growing sense of discomfort and, frankly, bewilderment. "Sure," Jack coughed, trying not to notice how close her lips were to his face. What advice?" Farah, perhaps unaware of the awkward proximity, blinked and leaned even closer to listen. Jack could almost feel the tickle of her breath on his cheek. A sudden tension gripped his chest. Finally, Luna entered the scene, as cool and logical as ever, but even she managed to accidentally turn things up a notch. "I've made adjustments to the power grid," she announced proudly, striding toward him with a data pad in hand. "But I could use your assistance with the final calibration." "Yeah, sure," Jack said, eager for a distraction and practically leaping at the opportunity to escape the ongoing parade of confusing emotions. Together, he and Luna worked side by side on the system upgrades. They were shoulder to shoulder, close enough that their hands brushed occasionally as they adjusted various panels and wires. Each time their fingers touched, Jack felt a strange flutter in his chest, something halfway between admiration and attraction. Luna, ever the focused one, didn't seem to notice. At least, not at first. When their hands brushed for the third time, Luna finally paused, her head tilting slightly as if she were calculating the frequency of the touches. "You seem distracted," she observed, her voice calm but direct. "You could say that," Jack muttered under his breath, feeling a bead of sweat roll down his back. He was starting to wonder if the universe was playing some cosmic joke on him. As night fell, Jack lay in bed, sleepless, his mind a tangle of emotions. He was their protector, but now he felt something deeper. These women trusted him, and his growing attraction troubled him. As sleep finally began to claim him, 1 foot remained. Despite the challenges, this felt like where he belonged. The old soldier had found not just a new purpose, but a new family, one forged in the strangest of circumstances. Little did Jack know, as he drifted off to sleep, that their newfound peace was about to be shattered. The echoes of his past and the consequences of his actions at the slave auction were racing across the stars, bringing with them a storm that would test the bonds of their unconventional family to their very limits. A home under siege. The morning started quietly, as it had for the past few weeks. Jack was up early, sipping his coffee and watching the women go about their morning routines. Kira was already on alert, pacing near the door, keeping a watchful eye on the surroundings. Lyra sat quietly at the table, deep in thought, while Farah and Luna tinkered with the house's systems, making small improvements to the outdated tech. It was peaceful, almost comfortable. But peace, as Jack knew all too well, was always fragile. A deep, resonating hum suddenly filled the air, vibrating through the walls of the house. Jack froze, his hand tightening around his coffee mug. That sound, it was familiar, too familiar. The feeling in the air shifted from calm to something far more sinister. Kira stopped pacing and moved toward the window, her sharp eyes narrowing. "Jack," she said quietly, "we've got company." Jack set his cup down slowly and stepped toward the door. The moment he stepped outside, the breath was nearly knocked out of him. Zoltar's soldiers had arrived. There were 5 of them standing in front of the house, their weapons at the ready. Sleek black armor covered their massive frames, each soldier holding a high-tech plasma rifle that hummed with lethal potential. Their faces were hidden behind faceless helmets, their bodies completely still, like statues waiting for a command to move. Behind them, Zoltar's fleet loomed in the sky, casting long shadows over the house. "This is worse than I thought," Jack muttered, stepping back inside. His mind raced. Zoltar wasn't here for negotiations anymore. He was here to claim what he thought was his, and this time he'd brought an entire army to back him up. The tension in the house thickened, the atmosphere oppressive. Farah, who had been her usual confident self moments ago, looked shaken. Her sharp feline eyes flicked between the soldiers outside and Jack, her tail twitching nervously. She swallowed hard, and for the first time, Jack saw fear in her eyes. "They're going to kill us, aren't they?" she whispered, her voice tight. Before Jack could answer, the house comms crackled to life. Zoltar's voice echoed through the room, cold and calculating. "Jack Hawkins, I'm giving you 1 hour to surrender the women. 1 hour. If you do, I'll let you live. Resist, and I'll turn that house into dust." Laura's hand trembled as she pressed it to her mouth, her eyes wide. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice cracking. For a brief moment, Jack was unsure. Panic flickered across his mind, but he forced it down. He couldn't afford to lose his cool now, not in front of them. "We have a chance," Jack said, his voice steady though his mind raced. He glanced at the walls, remembering the hidden defense systems built into the very bones of the house. "This place has an auto-defense mechanism. When Sarah and I built this home, we prepared for any worst-case scenario. It can hold off attackers for 2 or 3 hours, maybe more depending on the strength of their weapons." Farah's ears perked up. "What kind of defenses?" Jack looked at her. "Shielding, cloaking fields, perimeter turrets, AA-controlled. They won't expect it, but it won't last forever." Luna stepped forward, her brows furrowed in thought. 3 hours, but we need more time than that." Jack looked at her, confused. "What do you mean?" Luna's face was unusually tense. "We have a way to fight back, Jack. A way for you to fight back." She glanced toward a small compartment she had been working on earlier, something Jack hadn't paid much attention to. "There's a rejuvenation pod here. It's old tech from before you even found me, but I've been fixing it. If you get in, it will make you younger." Jack blinked, taking in what she was saying. Younger. Luna nodded, her expression serious. You'll be back in your prime, strong enough to take Zoltar head-on. But the problem is, it's going to take 4 hours for the process to complete. 4 hours? Kira said, frowning. Zoltar gave us 1. That's where the plan comes in, Luna continued. We can keep the house open, make it look like we're still deciding to surrender for the first hour. Once that hour is up, we activate the shields and close everything down. That'll buy us 3 hours of defense while Jack is in the pod. And then what? Farah asked, her voice sharp. What if the shields don't hold? What if they get in? We'll fight, Kira said simply. We hold them off until Jack's ready. Jack's mind raced, processing everything. The rejuvenation pod, it was the same tech Sarah had tried to use years ago. It had been unstable then, dangerous even. But now, Luna had worked on it, fixed it. If it could give him the strength he needed to protect them. All right, Jack said, standing taller. Let's do it. Zoltar's soldiers stood motionless outside, their weapons gleaming in the daylight, while the women worked quickly to prepare the house for the inevitable attack. Jack stepped into the rejuvenation pod, the same machine that had once taken so much from him, the same tech that had caused Sarah's death when it malfunctioned. His heart pounded in his chest, but Luna's eyes reassured him. She had made it safe. She had fixed it. Trust me, she said softly, her hand brushing his shoulder as she secured him inside. I won't let anything happen to you. The pod sealed with a hiss, and Jack felt the cool air inside press against his skin. He closed his eyes as the process began, electricity rippling through his body, every muscle screaming in protest as his cells were pulled apart and rebuilt. The pain was intense, but he gritted his teeth, focusing on the goal ahead. Outside, the first hour passed, and Zoltar's voice returned, impatient and cold. Time's up, Hawkins. With a swift command, the house eye engaged, and the shield snapped into place. The house shimmered briefly, a dome of energy locking around it as the defense turrets whirred to life. Zoltar's soldiers reacted immediately, raising their weapons and opening fire. Bolts of plasma slammed into the shields, lighting up the sky in brilliant flashes of blue and red. But the house held, for now. Inside, Kira, Lyra, Farah, and Luna crouched near the windows, firing back at the soldiers with precision. Kira's eyes narrowed as she aimed, taking down 2 soldiers with clean shots. Farah darted from window to window, her feline reflexes allowing her to pick off soldiers before they could react. Lyra focused, using her abilities to sense the soldiers' next moves, calling out to Kira and Farah as they fought. Luna remained by Jack's side, monitoring the pod, watching the clock tick down. They had 3 hours, but they needed every second to count. Outside, Zoltar's soldiers were relentless. Their advanced weapons hammered the shields, plasma rifles, explosive rounds, everything they had. But Jack's house ally was no slouch. The turrets fired back with deadly precision, taking down soldiers as they approached the perimeter. Still, the enemy kept coming. Another hour passed, and the house trembled with the force of the assault. Zoltar's soldiers weren't giving up, and the shields were weakening. Inside, Jack's body was being reshaped, his muscles regaining strength, his bones knitting back together. He could feel the changes happening, but he knew it wasn't over yet. Suddenly, the AI's voice crackled through the house, warning, shields at 30% capacity. Estimated time to failure, 5 minutes. Kira swore under her breath, her grip tightening on her weapon. We're running out of time. Luna looked up from the pod, her face pale. Jack needs 1 more hour, just 1. Farah's ears twitched, her tail lashing in frustration. We don't have an hour. We barely have 5 minutes. The AI spoke again. There is an underground escape route. I recommend immediate evacuation. Proceed to the basement for additional security. Kira exchanged a glance with Lyra, and without another word, they moved together. The 4 women grabbed the pod, dragging it toward the basement. Jack was unconscious inside, the transformation still in progress. The house shook violently as they moved, plasma bolts pounding against the remaining shields. But they didn't stop. They couldn't. The basement door loomed ahead, and just as they reached it, the shields gave way. "Move," Kira shouted, and they dragged the pod down the stairs just as the AI locked the doors behind them. They had bought themselves a little more time, but Zoltar's soldiers were closing in. The basement was darker than Jack remembered, the walls lined with old military gear, some long outdated but still functional. The dim glow of emergency lights flickered as the house AI continued to calculate the impending breach. "Shields have failed. Enemy forces approaching perimeter. 5 minutes to full entry." Kira and Farah grunted as they maneuvered the rejuvenation pod into the center of the room, positioning it near the far wall. Luna stayed beside Jack, monitoring his vitals on the pod's display, while Lyra scanned the area, trying to keep calm despite the tension radiating from the others. The ground shook as the sound of explosions reverberated through the house. Zoltar's soldiers were closing in, and the remaining defenses wouldn't hold them for long. "Do we have any weapons down here?" Farah hissed, her tail twitching, every muscle in her body taut. "We can't just sit here and wait for them to break in." "There's an old armory near the back." Jack's voice came over the comm from within the pod, weak but growing stronger. "I'll be up soon. Just keep them off until I'm done." Kira shook her head. "You better hurry." Luna glanced at the timer on the rejuvenation pod. "He's got 30 minutes left. That's all we need to buy." 30 minutes feels like an eternity when they've got plasma rifles aimed at our heads, Farah muttered, but she was already moving toward the armory, checking the inventory. "We've got a few heavy weapons back here. Not much, but it'll have to do." Lyra moved to Jack's side, placing a hand on the pod's surface. "We're with you, Jack. Just hold on." Kira's eyes were locked on the basement door, her grip tight on the plasma rifle she had scavenged from the armory. "They're coming." The A's voice chimed in, unnervingly calm amid the chaos. "Enemy forces entering the house. Internal defenses are now active." Suddenly, the walls above them vibrated with the sound of laser fire, metallic clanking, and muffled shouts. Zoltar's soldiers had broken into the house, but the air-controlled defense systems kicked into high gear. Automated turrets popped out from hidden panels in the walls, cutting down soldiers as they tried to advance. The women listened to the chaos above them, hearing screams and the rapid thudding of boots. The AI was doing its job, taking out as many soldiers as it could, but they all knew it wouldn't last forever. Zoltar's men were well equipped, and it was only a matter of time before they overwhelmed the system. 30 minutes, Kira muttered, her knuckles white as she gripped her rifle. "We can hold them for 30 minutes. Upstairs, Zoltar's soldiers moved through the house cautiously, trying to outmaneuver the A's defenses. Plasma shots rang out, punctuated by the sound of men shouting orders as more soldiers poured in. They began to overwhelm the house's internal systems, finding weak points in the A's targeting patterns. One of Zoltar's lieutenants, a hulking figure in black armor, gritted his teeth as he ducked behind a wall, watching as one of the A's turret beams narrowly missed him. "They're dug in," he growled into his comm. "We'll break through soon." The soldiers weren't just here to fight. They were hunting. Zoltar had made it clear that the 4 alien women were valuable, and the soldiers moved with cold precision through the house, piece by piece. But they hadn't expected the internal defense systems to be this powerful. Turrets popped out from walls, floors, and ceilings, cutting down soldiers with brutal efficiency. One squad was wiped out entirely before they could even fire a shot. Still, the soldiers pressed on, their leader barking orders as they inched closer to the basement. The walls were scoured with plasma burns, and smoke filled the air. But they were advancing. Slowly but surely. In the basement, the tension grew with every second. Jack's transformation was still underway, and the women knew they couldn't hold the line forever. Luna checked the display on the pod, her eyes scanning the timer. 20 minutes left. "We don't have 20 minutes," Farah snapped, loading a new charge into her rifle. They're getting closer. Just then, a deafening explosion echoed through the basement, shaking the walls and knocking loose some debris from the ceiling. The lights flickered as the AI recalibrated. "They're in," Kira shouted, raising her rifle as the door to the basement rattled violently. Lara stood by the pod, her eyes wide, focusing on Jack's form inside the machine. She whispered something under her breath, her voice filled with hope and fear. "We need more time," Farah called out, stepping back from the door as the pounding grew louder. As if in response, the AI's voice chimed in again. "Recommendation: use the underground escape route. Access via the southern wall. Time to safe evacuation, 5 minutes." Without missing a beat, Luna rushed to the far wall and pressed a hidden panel. The wall slid open, revealing a narrow passage leading down into a tunnel. "We have to move now," Luna said, her voice urgent. "We'll bring Jack with us." Kira and Farah nodded immediately, grabbing the pod. It was heavy, but between the two of them, they managed to drag it toward the tunnel entrance. Lara moved ahead, leading the way, as Luna helped stabilize the pod, keeping an eye on Jack's vital signs. "We need to get him out of here," Lara said quietly, her fingers brushing the surface of the pod. Behind them, the basement door began to give way, cracks forming in the steel as the soldiers outside continued to hammer against it. "Move," Kira barked, pulling harder on the pod as they disappeared into the tunnel. The house AI activated one final defense as they left the basement. Blasts of plasma fire shot from hidden panels, filling the room with blinding light. Zoltar's soldiers, finally breaking through the door, were met with a barrage of lasers, cutting them down as they tried to enter. But it wouldn't last long. The AI's energy reserves were nearly depleted. In the tunnel, the women moved as quickly as they could, dragging the pod with Jack still inside. The sounds of battle faded behind them as they pushed deeper into the underground passage. The tunnel was narrow, with walls lined with old tech and pipes, but it was their only hope. They moved in silence, their focus entirely on getting Jack to safety. After what felt like hours but was only minutes, they reached the end of the tunnel. It opened into a large chamber, an underground facility Jack had built long ago but never used. In the center of the chamber was a vehicle, sleek and built for speed. "Load him in," Kira ordered, her voice strained from the effort of pulling the pod. Together, they lifted the rejuvenation pod and slid it into the vehicle's cargo bay. Luna climbed into the driver's seat, her hands already moving over the controls. "This will get us to the next location. We should be safe there." The women piled into the vehicle, their breaths ragged from the exertion. As the engine rolled to life, the vehicle shot forward, speeding through the underground tunnel system toward Jack's hidden refuge. Back in the house, the last of Zoltar's soldiers had reached the basement. Their boots crunched on the debris-strewn floor, but the room was empty save for the smoldering remains of the house's AI defenses. The leader of the squad growled in frustration. They escaped. He activated his comm, speaking directly to Zoltar. "Sir, they're gone, but we're tracking them." Zoltar's voice was calm, almost amused. "Good, let them run. We'll find them, and when we do, they'll wish they hadn't." As the vehicle sped through the tunnels, Jack's transformation finally reached its completion. His breathing steadied, his muscles filled with strength once more. Inside the rejuvenation pod, his eyes flickered open. He was back. The underground refuge was desperate measures. The underground refuge was silent save for the faint hum of the rejuvenation pod. Jack stood up, fully restored to his younger, stronger self, feeling a surge of power and determination course through his veins. Around him, the women, Kira, Lyra, Farah, and Luna, were focused on their tasks, preparing for what was to come. Their moment of peace had been short-lived, and now Zoltar was closing in once again. Luna's voice broke the silence, urgency evident in her tone. "He's tracked us. Zoltar's coming with the rest of his fleet." Jack's jaw clenched as he turned to the wall of dormant ships in the underground hangar. They had barely caught their breath, and now the final confrontation was inevitable. "How long?" Jack asked, his mind already calculating their next move. "5 minutes tops," Luna replied, her eyes glued to the display showing Zoltar's fleet approaching their location. "He's coming in fast." Jack nodded, his mind racing. "We've got just enough time." He approached the lead ship, a sleek, high-tech war vessel that had been hidden away for years. The ship was armed with advanced weaponry, some of which hadn't been seen in battle for decades. Jack's fingers brushed against the cold metal, and a small grin tugged at the corner of his mouth. This was it, his chance to end Zoltar once and for all. "Everyone aboard," he ordered, his voice steady. "We're going to take this fight to him." The women moved quickly, taking their positions inside the warship. The vessel powered up, its engines roaring to life as Jack sat in the pilot's seat. His hands were steady on the controls, his mind sharp, every reflex feeling like it had been honed in preparation for this moment. The ship ascended, breaking through the surface of the planet and into the sky where Zoltar's fleet was waiting. Dozens of enemy ships hovered in formation, each one bristling with weapons aimed directly at them. "Here we go," Kira muttered, her fingers tight around the weapons console. But before the first shot was fired, Luna spoke up. "Wait, there's something else." Jack glanced at her. "What is it?" "I found this in the tech from your old days," she said, her voice urgent. "It's a device, a sort of advanced vehicle. It lets us phase through walls, metal, anything. If we use it, we can board Zoltar's ships one by one, take them out from the inside." Jack's eyes narrowed, intrigued. "How does it work?" Luna pressed a few buttons, and a small compartment opened up, revealing a sleek, futuristic device, a large orb with pulsating lights around its edges. "We get inside. It's a transport system designed for stealth. Zoltar won't see us coming. We'll phase into his ships and eliminate the crews one by one." Jack exchanged a glance with Kira, Farah, and Lyra. This was their chance. A direct attack on Zoltar's fleet would be suicide, but this could work. "Let's do it," Jack said. Zoltar's fleet hovered ominously, their ships poised for an attack. But they weren't expecting what happened next. Jack's ship vanished from their sensors, leaving the enemy fleet confused. Zoltar, aboard his command vessel, frowned as he stared at the readings. "Where are they?" he demanded. His lieutenant checked the scanners. "We've lost them, sir. They were here a second ago." Before he could finish, the first of Zoltar's ships went dark. Inside, Jack and the women had phased through the walls using Luna's advanced transport system. They moved silently through the corridors, their bodies invisible to the enemy crew as they eliminated them one by one. Kira led the charge, taking out guards with swift, lethal strikes. Farah moved with feline grace, her claws flashing as she cut through Zoltar's elite fighters. Lyra's telepathic abilities allowed her to predict every move the crew made, while Luna kept the transport system ready for their next infiltration. One by one, Zoltar's ships fell. The crews didn't even have time to react before they were taken down. Their ships left powerless, floating aimlessly in space. Zoltar's frustration grew as more of his ships went dark. "What's happening out there?" he roared, slamming his fist onto the console. "They're taking us out from the inside, sir," his lieutenant replied, panic creeping into his voice. "We don't know how they're doing it, but they're inside our ships." Zoltar's eyes burned with fury. "Find them. Now." But it was too late. By the time Zoltar's fleet realized what was happening, more than half of his ships had been disabled, their crews eliminated by Jack and the women. As they phased in and out of the enemy ships, silently taking down soldiers, Jack felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was what he had trained for all those years ago, not just to fight, but to protect. And now he wasn't just protecting a planet or an ideal. He was protecting his new family. With the rest of Zoltar's fleet neutralized, Jack and the women decided it was time to take the fight directly to Zoltar's command ship, the final piece of the puzzle. They used their advanced invisible facing device to breach the outer hull of Zoltar's ship, slipping inside like ghosts. The moment they materialized inside, Zoltar was waiting for them. Without warning, Zoltar's cannons fired, filling the air with a deafening roar. The walls around them lit up with blinding energy as plasma bolts slammed into their invisible vehicle. The ship shuddered violently, alarms blaring as the shields failed under the relentless assault. "We're hit," Luna screamed as the vehicle buckled under the barrage of fire. "Get out of here," Jack shouted, gripping the controls. He could feel the ship dying beneath his hands, the facing technology malfunctioning from the plasma damage. Before he could act, a second explosion rocked the transport. The invisible device they had used so effectively was done, destroyed by Zoltar's ambush. The impact sent Kira, Lyra, and Farah flying across the corridor, their bodies slamming hard against the walls. All three women were unconscious in an instant, their limp forms sprawled on the floor. Jack's heart pounded as he fought to regain control of the situation. "Luna, get them out of here," he ordered, his voice sharp with urgency. Luna, shaken but conscious, scrambled to drag Kira, Lyra, and Farah out of the wrecked transport. Jack glanced over his shoulder, his hands gripping the controls of the now smoking vehicle. Zoltar's laugh echoed through the ship. "You're predictable, Hawkins. Did you really think you could sneak aboard my ship?" Realizing they were outgunned and outmaneuvered, Jack made a snap decision. "We're retreating," he shouted, pulling back the controls and sending the ship into reverse. The remnants of their facing device flickered uselessly as he slammed the ship's engines into overdrive, pushing it back toward the outer airlock. "Jack, we can't," Luna began, panic in her voice. "We're not staying," Jack cut her off, guiding the crippled ship back toward their own warship, docked just outside. Zoltar's cannons fired again, the plasma scorching the air as Jack barely managed to avoid the blasts. The hull of their vehicle groaned under the pressure, but Jack held it together long enough to escape. As they hurtled out of Zoltar's ship and into open space, Jack saw his warship waiting. With the last of their vehicle's power, they made it aboard, crashing into the docking bay with a jarring impact. "Luna, get them to the medical bay," Jack shouted as he unstrapped himself from the pilot's seat. "We're not done yet." Luna nodded, her face pale with worry, but she moved quickly, dragging Kira, Lyra, and Farah toward the med bay. The ship's AI immediately began scanning their vitals, stabilizing them as Jack made his way back to the cockpit. He climbed into the pilot's seat, his fingers wrapping tightly around the controls. Zoltar's ship was looming ahead, still intact, still dangerous. Jack's warship, though advanced, felt small in comparison, but he had been through worse. He knew Zoltar's arrogance would be his undoing. Zoltar's voice crackled through the comms, smug and confident. "Hawkins, you can run, but you can't hide. You've lost. Your women are down. Now it's your turn." Jack's lip curled into a grim smile. "Not today, Zoltar." The final battle was about to begin, and Jack knew that everything, his life, the lives of his new family, and the fate of countless others who suffered under Zoltar's reign, hung in the balance. But as he faced down the enemy that had haunted him for so long, Jack felt no fear, only determination. It was time to end this, once and for all. Victory and new beginnings. Zoltar fired the first shot, unleashing a blast from his ship's gravitic destabilizer, a weapon Jack had never seen before. The beam bent the very fabric of space, warping reality as it surged toward Jack's warship. It twisted asteroids and debris into spirals, pulling them into its destructive vortex. Jack's mind raced. "Photon phase matrix now," he barked, slamming a button on the console. His ship flickered, shifting out of phase with normal space for a split second, allowing the gravitic beam to pass harmlessly through. As his ship reappeared, Jack wasted no time. He activated the neutron imploder missiles, launching a barrage at Zoltar's command ship. The missiles arsed through space, homing in on Zoltar's shields. Zoltar's ship flared as the shields absorbed the neutron blast, glowing a bright blue before flickering. The shields had weakened. Jack grinned. Time for something new. He powered up his ship's pulse shatter cannon. The weapon hummed with energy, a high-pitched whine filling the cockpit as it charged up. Unlike ordinary weapons, the pulsed shatter cannon destabilized matter at a molecular level, disintegrating anything it touched. "Let's see how you handle this," Jack muttered, and he fired. The crimson pulse of energy surged toward Zoltar's weakened shields. It struck with a violent crack, and the effect was immediate. Zoltar's ship groaned under the impact, the hull plates crumbling as the energy ate through the outer layers of armor. Pieces of Zoltar's ship began to disintegrate, torn apart by the relentless force. But Zoltar wasn't finished yet. With a snarl, he unleashed his singularity launcher, a weapon Jack hadn't expected. A swirling black sphere formed at the tip of Zoltar's ship, rapidly growing in size as it hurtled toward Jack's warship. It was a mini black hole, pulling everything in its path toward its crushing center. Jack's heart raced. He slammed his hand down on the quantum spin drive, a unique propulsion system designed to create pockets of negative spacetime around the ship. The ship jerked violently, slingshotting out of the Singularity's pull just before it could crush them. His ship spiraled through the debris field, and Jack's knuckles were white on the controls. He brought the ship back around, his eyes locked on Zoltar's vessel. The command ship was wounded, but it was still dangerous. "This ends now," Jack muttered, his voice low. He activated his most powerful weapon, the dimensional rift cannon. The ship's systems groaned as the cannon powered up, dark energy swirling around its core. This weapon would tear open spacetime itself, creating a rift that would swallow even the largest ship's whole. Jack lined up the shot. Zoltar's attention was still focused on his black hole, but Jack had the advantage now. "This is for my family," he said, and fired. The cannon erupted, a beam of dark energy streaking across space. It struck Zoltar's command ship with terrifying force, and for a moment, reality seemed to crack. A massive rift opened, pulling the ship into it. Zoltar's scream echoed through the comms, his voice filled with rage and fear. "You can't do this, Hawkins. I will have my revenge." But Jack wasn't listening. He watched as Zoltar's ship was torn apart piece by piece, the rift consuming everything until there was nothing left. In a matter of seconds, Zoltar and his entire command vessel were gone, swallowed by the void. Silence fell over the battlefield, broken only by the hum of Jack's warship drifting among the wreckage. He slumped back in his seat, his breathing heavy, his mind reeling from the intensity of the fight. But it was done. Zoltar was gone, his fleet destroyed. Jack stood and made his way toward the med bay, where Luna was waiting, watching over the unconscious women. "They'll be okay," Luna said softly, offering him a relieved smile. "Thanks to you." Jack smiled, the weight of the battle finally lifting from his shoulders. He moved to where Kira, Lyra, and Farah lay, their bodies beginning to stir. One by one, they opened their eyes, looking up at him with gratitude. "Did you win?" Kira asked with a sleek grin. Jack chuckled. "You could say that." Farah stretched lazily, her playful nature returning. "Took you long enough." Lyra reached out, her hand finding Jack's. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion. Without hesitation, Kira leaned in and kissed him, her touch firm and full of feeling. Farah followed, her kiss playful and teasing. Lyra's was soft and gentle, while Luna stepped forward last, her kiss filled with quiet curiosity and gratitude. Jack smiled, his heart full. "We've been through hell together." Kira grinned, "And we came out on top." Farah nudged him, her eyes twinkling. "What now, Commander?" Jack's gaze softened as he looked at the women around him, his family, forged in battle and love. "Now," he said, his voice full of warmth, "we're going somewhere far away from all this. somewhere we can finally be free. With the battle behind them, Jack set a course for one of the most beautiful, untouched planets in the galaxy, a paradise where the skies were always blue and the worries of the universe couldn't reach them. As they flew through the stars, the women gathered around Jack, their new family bound by love, trust, and the battles they had fought together. They had earned their peace, and for the first time in years, Jack felt like he was exactly where he belonged. The ship's air chimed in, its voice calm and reassuring, entering the atmosphere of planet Eden. Welcome home. As they descended through the clouds, a breathtaking landscape unfolded before them. Lush forests of iridescent trees stretched as far as the eye could see, their leaves shimmering in hues of purple and gold. Crystal-clear lakes dotted the terrain, reflecting the twin suns that bathed the planet in a warm, comforting glow. Jack guided the ship to a clearing near a pristine beach, where soft pink sand met the azure waters of an alien ocean. As the engines powered down, a sense of peace washed over them all. "It's beautiful," Lyra whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. Kira squeezed Jack's hand. "You did it. You really found us a home." As they stepped out onto their new world, Jack felt a profound sense of contentment. Here, on this untouched paradise, they could start anew. No more running, no more fighting. Just peace, love, and the family they had forged together. Farah darted out onto the beach, her feline instincts reveling in the new sensations. She laughed, a sound of pure joy that Jack had never heard from her before. "Last one in the water is a rotten egg," she called out, already sprinting toward the waves. Luna knelt down, examining the unique flora with fascination. "The biodiversity here is astounding," she mused. "We could learn so much." Lyra closed her eyes, basking in the emotional warmth emanating from everyone. "It feels right," she said softly, "like we were always meant to end up here." Kira wrapped her arm around Jack's waist, leaning her head on his shoulder. "So, old man," she teased, but her voice was filled with affection. "Ready for our next adventure?" Jack looked at each of them in turn. Kira, the fierce warrior who had learned to love. Lyra, the gentle empath who had found her strength. Farah, the wily survivor who had discovered trust. And Luna, the brilliant mind who had opened her heart. And then he looked at himself, the old soldier who had found a new purpose and a new life. "You know what?" he said, a genuine smile spreading across his face. "I think I am." As the suns began to set, painting the sky in breathtaking shades of orange and purple, Jack and his newfound family stood together on the beach. They had faced unimaginable challenges, battled against overwhelming odds, and emerged victorious. But more than that, they had found each other. In that moment, watching the alien waves lap against the shore and feeling the warmth of his family around him, Jack knew that this was more than just a happy ending. It was a new beginning, one filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. The old soldier had finally found his peace, and the adventure of a lifetime was just beginning.